Okay, well, let's get going. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always so exciting to see our great HR friends. We've been doing a couple of different webinars through the whole COVID process just to stay connected with you and to hopefully give you the tools and the training that you need to start thinking about kind of this new future that we're headed to. So we're glad that you could join us today. Our goal today is to give you the tools and the knowledge to really support not just your candidate selection process, but also how do you help your candidates onboard successfully, and even how do you think about great candidates for internal promotions. So as I mentioned, there is a chat box going. I'd ask that you just sort of stay on mute, but then unmute yourself and feel free to ask questions or jump in as you need to, or that you can type your questions into the chat box. Stephanie and Chris are producing today, so they'll keep track of all the questions that are in the chat box, and then we can save some time at the end to answer those as well. But if you have something that comes up, like right in the moment, topic that we're talking about, feel free to just unmute and jump in. So let's dive in. Thumbs up if you can see the PowerPoint screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, then we'll just move along here. Hopefully, I gotta get there. Ta-da! So there's been lots of changes in talent acquisition, even pre-COVID, right? As we've been heading there over the past, I don't know, maybe 5, 10 years, lots of different things that I've seen happening. One I call the Yelp factor. I just read an article or a study that was done by CareerArc that said 25% of applicants stop the application process if they see a bad review. So it's just like restaurants or anything else. If we're not getting good reviews, we're not getting those good applicants to apply. The social media sourcing, I know all of you are immersed in that because I see your jobs posted all the time, and you're probably looking for candidates in those new and different ways. What I call the Uber worker, the gig worker, how do you transition to thinking about how do I find people that aren't looking for a real job, that are just looking to do something as a side job. And I think now more people are thinking about doing some things either on a project basis or on a short-term basis, or a temporary basis, or on their own terms. So that's certainly changing our talent acquisition process. I think we have what I call the impatient job seeker, the person who needs to be constantly touched through the process so that they don't lose interest in the job. I read an article that said 99% of Fortune 500 companies do not communicate with job seekers past the point of confirming that their resume was actually received. So that can give you a real competitive advantage if you stay in touch with your job seekers, because so many of the big companies aren't doing that. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity to build that candidate engagement process. And of course, the applicant tracking systems and all the automation that you're using in-house has changed the way that you're recruiting. I think it's also interesting to think about this new interview model that companies are experimenting with, where they're sending an email to candidates saying, here's the questions that we want you to answer as part of our interview process. And then the candidate videos themselves answering the questions, uploads the video to your site so that you and your team can review those video pitches, so to speak, by the candidates. I think it's kind of a neat model. It certainly eliminates a lot of scheduling hassles. It can help you to juggle different time zones, eliminate some bias maybe in the hiring process or risks because everyone's going through the same process. And it's also a time saver for organizations. And now certainly I'm sure you're all doing some form of Zoom call or webinar interviews, which is really changing the way that we source and recruit and talk to candidates. But what I keep thinking about is, how do you really know who's behind that mask? And if we're not talking to people live or seeing them in person, can we really get a feel for who that person is and how they're going to fit in our organization? So today we're going to tackle this in 3 chunks. we're going to first start thinking about how organizations are restructuring today and using tools to figure out how do I help my team to understand the new skill set that's required kind of post COVID or as we're reopening and transitioning. And how do I look for people that fit that new model we're looking for? Then we're going to go through this rebuilding process, but people like you are looking for kind of new strategies, new tools, and new techniques to support that process. And then the third piece that we're going to cover today is this new role that employers are finding themselves in, which is how do I help my team members to become more resilient, to be able to deal with all the things that are happening. And by the end of this morning, what I want you to have is the tools and the confidence to be able to go do this for your organizations. So if you don't know me, I'm looking at the names of who's on the screen. I think most of you I know. My name's Amy Pearl, and I'm from Work Ignited. Stephanie Phibbs is in one of these pictures here. She's our producer for today. Many of you know her because she's often the primary point person for you when you're ordering credits or you have assessment questions, that type of thing. And Chris Coleman's also on. Chris can wave. Chris handles all of our billing and our office management. So we are here through the crisis to help you with whatever you need. So let's dive in. We're going to start with this idea of restructuring. This chart shows unemployment rates, historically unemployment rates. And, just a few months ago, we were at like 3.5% unemployment, and pretty much in a blip, we went to like 15% unemployment. And really, I don't think anyone knows what the future is going to look like. I keep watching all of these forecasters, and one says it's going to be fast, one says it's going to be slow, one says it's going to be all over the place. But what I think you can do is look to the historical trends. And if you go back to the recession of 2008, we had this big spike in unemployment, and then it trickled down kind of slowly over a number of years. And now with this new spike, what experts are saying is that we're going to have a pretty quick recovery to a certain point as places are all reopening, kind of where we are now, and then there'll be sort of this initial hiring surge. And then we'll get more to that trickle effect probably through 2021 and maybe even into 2022. So I'm hoping that, things turn around in a very positive and quick way, and that curve is, a little more dramatically going down, but I think we have to plan for reality. I also found this study that was done by the Manpower Group where it showed that 73% of employers plan to keep their workforce levels steady right now. So that does force this need to kind of restructure and think about how do we really maximize the return on this talent base that we currently have. But I was also excited to see that 23% of those surveyed do plan to hire through this process. What I'm hearing through our clients, which I think is maybe some things that you're thinking about as well, is perhaps this is an interesting time to think about upgrading our talent. A lot of people were laid off or let go. How can we be selective in terms of who we bring back and maybe look to bring some new talent into the organization, even though we might not be growing? We might be trying to replace some of the folks that either have chosen not to come back to work or we've chosen that we don't want them to come back to work. I'm hearing kind of rumblings of the potential for a lot of mergers and acquisitions through this process, just because organizations might not be able to survive and thrive on their own. So as we're thinking about quote unquote hiring people, you can also use some of these processes as you're merging and acquiring and kind of bringing new groups in to help people to figure out how they're going to fit and who fits and who might need some help through that process. So let's talk about restructuring. The message today is you got us to this point. Now we need you to take us to tomorrow. And that's the message that I think people are trying to share with their teams right now. You've helped us to be successful. We've had this crisis. Now, how do we retool to take us to where we need to be tomorrow? And COVID has really forced us to think about a new performance model and new skills that are required. The whole idea of building your agility and managing uncertainty. There's been a surge in the need for self-mastery. I have to be disciplined. I have to be accountable. I'm sitting in my house by myself, juggling a lot of things. How do I make sure that I'm accountable to my manager, and how are managers managing their new virtual teams in a way that allows for some flexibility and understanding, but also keeps that discipline in place that you had when everyone was coming to the office. And certainly the empathy that's needed now for people that are just struggling kind of either financially or physically or even just emotionally with this change. It is a new group of skills that and behaviors that are really required. Or maybe you'd look at this list and say, these were always required, but now they're just even more important. So what we're looking for is people that will fit with this new model. So what do I mean by fit? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to unmute yourselves because we are going to make a group salad. So everyone click unmute for a minute. And I'm going to pick some of you, and I want you to tell me, if we were making a salad, what ingredient would you bring to our salad party? Okay? So, Gabby, what ingredient would you bring?
Cheese.
Cheese. Excellent. And Erin, what ingredient would you bring?
Lettuce.
Okay. Julie, are you on, Julie Mungo? What ingredient would you bring?
I am. I would bring cucumbers.
Cucumbers. Excellent. Diana?
I would bring nuts.
Nuts. Excellent. Nicole?
Nuts.
Nicole, what are you going to bring? Dressing. Yes, absolutely. Something super fattening and rich. And then you can have a light version too.
Of course.
Alicia, what are you bringing? Tomato. Okay. So let's think about the salad. If we have lettuce and cucumbers and nuts and tomatoes and dressing and all these things, how would our salad be? It would be delicious, right? What if we had all these ingredients, and then when we all got to the party, we said, you know, we don't really want salad. Let's have cake instead. And all we have is lettuce and tomatoes and nuts and dressing. What's our cake going to taste like?
Not very good.
Salad. Too healthy.
Not very good, because it's going to taste like salad, right? So I'm looking for now cake, and all I have is salad ingredients. That is really the same idea behind job fit. So every individual is bringing a set of ingredients or characteristics to the table. Their critical thinking skills, their personality, how they behave, what they're interested in, what they're motivated by. And we are trying to put something on the table, right? We've got these ingredients that we're looking for. Basically, when I'm using the term job fit, what I'm basically saying is the ingredients that a candidate brings to the table are the ingredients that I'm looking for my recipe. So how do I define my recipe, right? How do I identify what are the requirements for a position, so that then when I'm looking for candidates, I'm looking for the right kind of people? We call those job profiles or performance models, right? That's all kind of the terminology that we've used. What's this ideal profile for the job? What's the performance model that we're looking for that's going to help someone to be successful? Many times you start with your job description. What's on the list, right? You've put thought into your job descriptions. You've got qualifications. You've thought about some of the things that maybe have made people successful in the past. That's an okay place to start. The struggle with that is that job descriptions now are changing because the way we're working are changing. So I've got to kind of revisit some of those things and think about, maybe are there new skills, new traits that are required. And a lot of times when you look at a job description, you know, maybe it was written a few years ago, or, you know, we wrote it when we created the job, but it hasn't been updated since then. So there can be some risk there in using that as a standalone tool, as a checklist for what I'm looking for in a new hire. You can layer on what we call a job analysis survey, which is I reach out to people and I ask them questions about what they think is important in this position. And I often find that the best people to ask are the people that are actually doing the job day in and day out, because they understand kind of what they do and what they need and what helps them to be successful. I might also consider surveying their bosses. You know, what are they looking for in terms of the people that are doing the job? And I would also consider surveying the people that report to them. What am I looking for in this person who I report to through a survey process? And then that gives you kind of some data that says, here's the kinds of things that the different levels within the organization would be looking for as I fill this position. I have found, though, that the best way to create a performance model is to use real humans that do the job well or demonstrate the characteristics that we think we're looking for in the future. And that's sort of a little bit of a different twist. You know, sometimes we tend to look at our high performers today and say, I want to replicate that person for the future, but I don't necessarily think about, are those the same people that are going to be successful in the future? So as you're assessing these things, you're thinking about your future needs. What are the business goals? What kinds of skills, behaviors, and knowledge are going to drive performance in that area? And then I can think about the job description. I can survey people and say, what do we think we're going to need? And then I can look at the real people that work here that demonstrate those characteristics, and I would run assessments for them so I could actually get the data to see what they have in common. And many of you already know this because you do it today. It isn't always the entire list. You know, some of you are Big Five users. There's, I don't know, 20 plus traits on there. Those top performing candidates don't match on every single characteristic, but there's usually a few that resonate with you based on your culture or that you see that they all have in common. Sometimes it's, you know, they're fussy, they're perfectionists. Sometimes they have a sense of urgency. Sometimes organizations look for people that are really warm and relationship oriented or big picture thinkers. So what you're looking for is real people that you feel can do the job successfully in the future. What are the things that they have in common? And not that we're trying to create cookie cutter people, because diversity is super duper important. So just what are some of those key themes that we know are really essential? Now, I think Alicia Thompson popped in somewhere there. Alicia, if you can unmute yourself. Alicia is the superstar, amazing talent and HR specialist at Lolly. And Lolly does their insurance organization. Alicia, you could tell us a little bit more about them. But what I wanted to do is tell you about this amazing process that Alicia and their HR team did when they began using assessments in their organization. And they followed this 3-step process that you see on the screen. The first thing that they did was they coordinated workshops for all of their managers. And we started by talking about salads, just like we did here, kind of the idea of bringing ingredients to the table and what ingredients we're looking for. And then we taught them about the model. They happened to be using the PXT Select assessment. So we, taught them about the model so they'd understand it. And then they worked in groups to complete a job analysis survey for the positions that report to them. So all of the managers in the introductory workshop were designing the models. Then we compared that to the job descriptions as well as the results of their high performers so that we could really think about their future needs and design performance models that will really work for them for the long haul. So Alicia, you're unmuted. I see that. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Uh-oh.
Oh, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
as soon as you said thank you for joining us, my whole computer froze, but I think that I'm back in business.
Oh, excellent. All right. And thumbs up from people. Can you hear us? Everyone okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So Alicia, tell us a little bit about Lolly in case someone's not familiar with your organization.
So Lolly is a family-owned insurance brokerage firm based out of Buffalo, headquartered on Delaware, but we have 11 locations throughout New York, and then we do have some offices more towards downstate, including Connecticut and New Jersey. So we're all over. We're about 430 people, and we've been in business for actually this year it's exactly 60 years. We're third generation owned, so we're owned by 2 brothers and a brother-in-law, And we are an insurance brokerage firm. So if somebody needs insurance, they come to us, we get the information from them, and then we go to the insurance carriers and we look for the coverage and the pricing for them. So that's a little bit about what we do. We do commercial lines, which would be like business insurance. We do personal insurance, so home, boat, auto, car, and we also write benefits for organizations as well.
Yeah, I bet some of your benefits customers are on this call today. And just such a great company, does so much for not just Western New York, but all of the communities in which you're in. So let's talk about your assessment process. What did you like about the process that you used to build your performance models?
I think one of the things that I really liked was the fact that we were able to include the managers and have them give their feedback and what they think is a good performer and what makes a good candidate for that role. And the fact that we were able to use some of those star performers in those roles and have them take the assessment and use that data to compile and combine with everything else that we had to make a really solid model. I think because we were able to do that, the managers buy into the assessment because they had a say in it and they know that the people who they really love in that position were used, that their information was used in building that model. And with that, they typically feel good about it and want to use it and feel that it is accurate when we go to use it for hiring purposes.
Yes, I think, that's terrific. They, one of the things I think you find when you include managers is a lot of times they're not even on the same page in terms of what we're looking for. So really engaging them sort of forces them to be aligned in terms of what those requirements are for the job. So what are the benefits that you thought you found from really having them engaged? How has that helped you now for the few years that you've been doing this?
Well, I think again, they feel very confident in the assessment and that it's accurate, and that when we are going to hire a candidate, if the assessment says this person might not be very good for this, they believe it. If they're maybe on the fence about a candidate and the assessment says, hey, maybe this person might be good, they're a high match, they say, okay, maybe we're going to give this person a shot. So that is a really nice benefit of it. And I think the fact that having them involved helped them to understand it more and understand what that assessment is really saying and what it's the information that it's telling you. And they get it past just the percentage that they see on the page, because I think for a long time somebody would get that assessment and they would just go right to the percentage match. And now that they've helped to build that assessment, they understand more about what it is and what it can tell you beyond just, what percentage a match a candidate is.
Yeah, going a little deeper. Are there particular traits that you and your team look for when you're reviewing the results?
Yeah, and you know what? It depends on the position. Like if we have an underwriter position open, we're looking for someone to score really high on the math. And I will tell you that probably every underwriting candidate I've ever hired there has gotten a 10 out of 10. Like they just kill it because that's what their degree is usually in or around. So, typically we look for, like I said, it depends on the position. If it's an underwriting position, we're going to look for math and high math scores. If it's maybe a higher level position, we're going to look for high English and high math. If behaviorally, it depends. I was just talking to a manager yesterday. She's a newer manager, and so she's never hired yet. And so I actually went through the assessments with her. It's an internal position, and so we actually were able to go through the assessments we had on file for those candidates, and I walked her through how you would use the assessment. And I said the behavioral is going to be different to what you're looking for depending on a lot of things. I said if you had a very negative team, you might look for somebody who's high on attitude. If you have a very loud team who maybe is very, very chatty and you're kind of hoping to tone that down, you might look for someone who's a little bit quieter. And so it really depends on the role and the team, what we're looking for, but the assessment does really help us with fitting somebody into the puzzle, the empty puzzle slot of that position on that team and what would really complete it the best.
Do you think your performance models will change? Are you looking for anything different now that we're evolving kind of beyond COVID-19 or trying to recover from it?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think that it will be interesting to see. There hasn't been a lot of conversation around them yet, but I think it's still early. Right now, our focus is trying to get who we can back in the office, safely. But I think that it will be interesting to see, in the next even 6 months, once that part is settled, the return is settled, seeing how it might affect the models and, the process of bringing somebody on and where the assessments will fit into that.
Yes, yeah. So you've been using PXT Select now for a couple of years. Before that, you used its predecessor. So just for a little background, PXT Select is now published by Wiley. They're actually the company that publishes DISC. They acquired a company called Profiles International. So some of you that have been in HR for a long time may have heard of Profiles International. Wiley acquired them and has just kind of rebranded it as PXT Select. So you've been using this for a long time at Wiley. How do you think using assessments in the hiring process have made a difference for you?
I think that it's one extra tool that we have in making a decision. And, Kim, who's my director, her and I always say it's threefold. It's when you're making a decision about a candidate, it's the interview, it's the references, and it's the assessment. And if one wasn't so good, but maybe some of the others are, there's ways to kind of investigate that. But it really is one extra tool that we have that we use on almost every single position that we hire for. I can't think of the last time we hired somebody where we didn't assess them. It's very crucial to our process and making sure that we're bringing in the right people.
Yeah, and your math is correct, because what the experts say is that an assessment should only account for about a third of your decision in the process. It's not like a yes or no decision maker. We're not using it to weed people out. It really is something that's just part of the puzzle. And we usually recommend that you use it certainly as a tool to understand the candidate, but really as a way to frame better questions, phrasing reference check questions, phrasing final interview questions, so that you can really unearth what the person is like, and validate their strengths certainly, and then make sure they've closed some of those risky gaps. So Alicia, thank you so much. Do you have any other comments that you want to share with our group?
No, I think, the assessments are a really nice tool. I came from an organization that didn't use an assessment or, this particular assessment, and I've been really happy with PXT, and we have found it to be really accurate. So we're definitely glad to have that available to us.
Excellent. And we are so glad to have you as part of our client team. So we're glad you could join us today. And if you have any questions that you specifically want to ask Alicia, kind of type them into the chat. And Stephanie's watching those, and she can bring them out at the end of today's session. So PXT Select, which is the assessment that Alicia uses and we've been referring to here, is a really cool tool. And what I like about it is it helps you to see three things in one assessment. You can look at someone's cognitive skills, their thinking skills, from a verbal perspective and a numerical perspective. Do they have verbal skills? Do they have numerical skills? And then can they solve problems with those things? From a behavioral traits perspective, if you're a Big Five user, you're going to recognize some of these terms because it's actually based on the Big Five model. It just doesn't have as many traits. They consolidated them into 9. And then there's a component on motivational or career interests, so you can understand kind of where this person wants to go. And as part of your session today, we're going to send you an email after this session that if you'd like your own assessment center to just get going using this, because it really is so easy, we can get you set up for that and schedule a follow-up quick walkthrough of how to use the system. But you can get your hands in there, you can look at some samples and try a few for your next couple of candidates. Now, one of the cool things about this system, I've talked about creating performance models. It actually comes with over 300 researched positions already set up in all different industries. So it's a great, quick turnkey tool. Now, I'm a giant fan of customizing these thinking about your culture, again, doing the job analysis survey, doing the assessment for some of your high performers. But if you're just looking for a grab and go, I want to go quickly and just compare a candidate to something that's been out there and researched, it's all loaded up for you to get started on that. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is drive organizational outcomes. And if I have better fit employees, we're going to see improvements in performance, certainly, but also in their attendance because they fit with the job. It's exciting to now come to work. They're more satisfied. You see them being more innovative because you've got these people that are sort of experts at what they do and more engaged, and definitely driving your retention numbers. So, restructuring. You took us to today. Now we need you to take us to where we want to go tomorrow. And your action steps are to think about new job requirements, about a new way of working. So what do I need to look for in my candidates? And how do you engage your team in creating those performance models that are going to drive you toward the future? So we've talked a little bit about restructuring, right? And just as Alicia said, right now we're just trying to get people back to work safely. And then how do we make sure that they can do what they need to do to drive us to be successful for this transition period? Now, how do we then go to the rebuilding phase and the hiring strategies that we're going to need to use in the future and be able to quickly analyze results with some new tools? So remember earlier, 23% of companies said they plan to hire now, and we've got mergers and acquisitions. People are trying to upgrade their staff. So what are HR professionals looking for in their assessment tools? They're looking for something that can very quickly give them a deep and full view of their candidates, something that's fast and easy. I don't want to have to think too hard. Something that will help me to still identify the effectiveness of potential managers and leaders. And how do we make sure that we're doing a great job in bringing in great customer service people and right, those entry-level frontline workers, do we have something that we can use for them where some of these more robust tools might be overkill or too expensive for kind of mass hiring? What can we use to quickly pre-screen entry-level workers? And what we're trying to do through the hiring process is understand, can somebody do the job? Do they have that cognitive ability? How are they going to do the job with their behavioral skills? And will they enjoy the job through their motivational interests? So what I want to do is show you how easy it is to do this, because I know most of you are already experts at this, but even if you're new, I want to show you how easy it is to do this. And so we are all going to do an analysis of Oliver Chase, and we're going to do it as a group. Oliver Chase is applying, he's a candidate for a sales position with our organization. So the first place we're going to start is thinking about the performance model for sales, right? So this happens to be the one that I just pulled from the library model, but it's probably something that you typically look for when you're looking for your sales professionals. I'm looking for somebody at the higher end of the thinking skills area, because I want them to be able to converse well with customers. I need them to maybe do some mathematical computations in terms of pricing and margins and those kinds of things. So a little bit higher on the thinking styles. And you might be sitting there saying, why would I hire someone that doesn't have strong critical thinking skills? Well, I want you to think back to all of your kind of work history. Have you ever met someone or worked with someone who was almost too smart for their own good? And they like out-talked people, and they thought, faster than people, and they almost lost people. They couldn't connect with them because they were just so darn bright. And a lot of times it's hard to manage really smart people, right? So when I'm coaching people, that's something that I work with them a lot on, because they're either really smart and they can't connect with other people, or they're trying to manage really smart people and they're trying to figure out, how do I give them the autonomy to capitalize on their brain power? But sometimes you can be too smart for your own good and too smart for a position, right? I need someone who can be at that right level. So again, if you assess your high performers, you can see where do they fit. And it doesn't make me a bad person if I don't have strong critical thinking skills, because I have gifts and talents in other areas that help me to be successful. But in this particular case, for the sales job, we are looking for somebody a little bit higher on the scales. Then when I look at the behaviors or personality, I'm looking for someone who can act with urgency, because I want them to have that sense of worry and that I want to be on top of things and get that sale, or if a customer or prospect calls, someone who's going to jump on it. someone who can be assertive without being too forceful, absolutely sociable, a people person. I want them to be more skeptical, maybe a little questioning by nature, but not afraid to make a decision and to be bold, and to be steadfast. If you're a big five user, you know, for sales, you look for people low in accommodation. Same thing is going to be true in the with the PXT Select. Someone who can work autonomously. I know some of you have salespeople all over the globe, so they need to be able to work without a lot of supervision. And someone who is more intuitive, kind of goes with their gut. So that shaded area is showing you the performance model that we're looking for, the green shaded area or the blue shaded area. And in terms of their interests, I want someone who's enterprising, which is about business minded and sales, management, that kind of thing. Someone who's very people oriented and wants to be in a people business, and someone who can be creative, kind of that strategic, connect the dots. So as they're listening to customers' needs, they can think about potential solutions for them. So that's the model that we're looking for. Now let's take a look at Oliver Chase's scores. What you're going to see here is one snapshot of his comprehensive selection report. And what this shows is his initials in the shaded areas, or maybe outside of the shaded areas, of each of the characteristics, each of the traits. And if you look to the right of that page, what you see is in three circles, how closely Oliver fits. So he's a 95% fit for thinking styles. He's a 66% fit for behavioral styles, and a 74% fit for interests, right? So basically, what percentage of the ingredients for the salad is he bringing to the table? He's bringing all the ingredients for thinking styles, about 2/3 of the behavioral ingredients, and about 3/4 of the interests. Now, general rule of thumb, no one's ever going to be at 100%. Don't be alarmed if someone's low. What we're looking for is at least, that 66 to 75%, 2/3 to 3/4 of a match. No one's ever a perfect match, right? So a little variability is good. If I'm looking at 75 and above, that's like a 2 thumbs up for this person. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to move you into breakout groups. There's going to be 4 breakout groups. One is going to think about Oliver's thinking styles. The second group is going to look at the first half of the behavioral traits. The third group is going to look at the second half of the behavioral traits. And then our fourth breakout group is going to have the career interests. So we're going to divide you into those 4 groups. You're going to get a little blip on the screen. It says you are being sent to and it'll tell you which traits you're looking at. So it'll say you are being sent to the thinking skills breakout group. That way you'll know which skills you're looking at. And I'll pop into each of the breakout groups just in case you're a little bit lost. And I want you to work with your group. We're going to give you 10 minutes to. As we were saying earlier, nothing is a perfect tool and no one's a perfect match. You're using this to guide some further questions that you're going to ask to the candidates and to their references, so that it just gives you that insight and that sort of foundation to start with those questions. Now, I asked you to think of questions because not all of you might want to use this tool, and figuring out whether you're using another tool, how do I use this data to sort of pull questions to validate someone's strengths and to think about some of those gap areas and how have they closed those in the past. The beauty of PXT Select is that in the candidate selection report, it actually recommends interview questions that you should ask the candidate. And not only does it give you the questions for just the challenge areas, it also gives you questions where you can validate their strengths in some of the other areas as well. And it'll show you, here's the question to ask, and this is what you should listen for when your candidate is speaking. So it really does help. Now everyone on this call I know is an expert in the hiring process. You've been doing it for a long time, so you could do this in your sleep. But this is a great tool that then you can give to the manager or the hiring manager, and or maybe some of you are using panel interviews where you've got different people sort of evaluating a candidate. This helps to make sure that they sort of stay focused on the important areas and then they're asking consistent questions from candidate to candidate to candidate. Now, we have another expert on our call, Erin Fearley from Pagula Sports and Entertainment. And Erin has been using the Comprehensive Selection Report for quite a bit of time. So, Erin, are you unmuted?
I am.
So, just in case anyone has been living maybe under a rock or isn't from the Western New York area, would you tell everyone what Pagula Sports and Entertainment is?
Yep. So Pagula Sports Entertainment, PSE, is they are the owners of the Bills and Sabres, as well as the Rochester Amherst and the Buffalo Bandits and the Rochester Nighthawks lacrosse team. And then PSE is more of like the admin support. So I actually work directly with the PSE, as well as Olive Harbor Center, all of the hospitality industries, and then the Rochester Arena.
Yeah, and it's a giant organization, and we're so grateful to have you and all of the contributions that your team makes here in Western New York. So tell us how you've been using PXT Select.
So we've honed in on it specifically for our hospitality managers. That's really the only department that runs the assessments regularly. We found it really successful in regards to identifying candidates. We definitely hit bumps in the road along the way where I don't think our managers initially trusted it as much as they do now, that it's very accurate. So it's been great to be able to take that deeper dive and really, just make it as part, as you said before, a third of that interview, the reference check, the interview, and then the assessment. And then we sit down and discuss what's best for the role.
Yes, good. And there is a learning curve. I've been using assessments for 2 decades, maybe even more now. And what I think, in order to get somebody to really buy in, you have to kind of show how the data will help them to solve a problem. So either they learn about themselves and something that they could do better or differently, or really more importantly, how do they learn about other people and how they can help them to be more successful. And I think once people see that the data can really give them a lot of insight, they buy in very quickly. And we love the fact that all of you become experts because our belief is that the keeper of the data has all the power. So if you've got this data in your organization and you can use the data to help managers and non-managers even to understand themselves, to understand others, and to solve problems, all of a sudden you're like gold to them. So that sounds like kind of the process that you've gone through, Erin. I had to maybe build a little credibility with the tool, and then it gets certainly a lot of acceptance. So what parts of the report do you find most valuable?
I love that it's a quick and easy snapshot. The managers love that piece because we were using, can't think about it, when I came into the organization, we were using a different assessment and it was pages upon pages upon pages of data, and the managers just didn't utilize it, where this is really that one snapshot. I take a deeper dive every time that we get one to sort of do some comparisons versus the resume. Maybe they're not as autonomous because they're a young, newer manager. So, I'll bring that up when we review it, but they like that quick and easy snapshot as well as the questions for that follow-up interview.
Mm-hmm. And so you're giving the managers the comprehensive selection report?
Yes.
And their reactions have
the
been...
whole thing. I think it's good for them to have that at their fingertips, but I also don't give it to them until I review it first and, a little bit of color around it in regards to why someone may or may not be hitting those marks and where we can ask deeper diver questions.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. A lot of times, no matter what tool you're using, people's eyes tend to go right to the gaps. Like, why is this person broken? What's wrong with this person? Are we going to be able to fix them? How do I fix them, right? And when you add that color commentary and you explain it to them, you kind of show them, we've got to look at, there's a phrase that's used when we do some of the Big Five training. It's every individual nature has its own beauty, right? So there's something wonderful about everyone, and no one's ever a perfect match, and no one's ever got all the characteristics. So what you're really doing is using this as a way to decide, are they the right person to bring into the organization? And if they've got that 75, 85% match, that's great. Just like all of us, they're going to have an area for refining and polishing. That's where we're going to have to help them and support them once they get here. So how have you found the report to be helpful in terms of pointing out these strengths or future areas of development?
It's really sort of working with the managers in regards to what are the strengths of the other managers that are going to be surrounding them, and do we have the tools to develop these, weaknesses within our organization, and then really, understanding what trainings we have to offer, or if we have the resources to send these managers that may have areas of development outside the organization to obtain those skills.
Yeah, and this is, you do have the opportunity to get some consolidated reporting so that I could look at, let's take Oliver Chase and all my sales team. I can plot them all together and see where some of maybe the gaps might be. And then do we need to do some dedicated training in those areas for the team in order to help give them the tools to be able to compensate for some of those gaps?
Absolutely.
Erin, we're so glad that you could join us today. Do you have any other thoughts or comments for the team?
It's a great tool. I love using it. I think it's also really cool to utilize the individual reports when we do hire someone. A lot of times people will ask to see the report, and then to take that one-on-one time, so then it sort of gives them areas of where, a little more self-insight into where they might need to focus some of their energies, or where, they're doing well.
Yes. And we are all like crossing our fingers that we will be live at a Bills game as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Alicia, I think you're still on. And Erin, if you would stay on for a minute, and Alicia, if you would unmute. We did have a customer that's a question that was posted to the chat that you might be able to comment on. And the question was, do you feel that the assessment helps you to eliminate bias during hire? She often sees a hire like me bias with her teams. Like, I want someone just like me. So has the assessment helped you in your case to maybe eliminate some of that?
It has, and I hope that I answer this question right for her. I think that the assessment itself is very unbiased, and I think that it tells you whether the person is a match or not. The assessment, like I said, doesn't have any bias, so it just simply tells you what level of a fit that person is. And I think it can take a lot of the hire like me, or I want somebody just like me, out of it, because the assessment is simply going to tell you whether or not that person is a fit for that job or not. And it's, if it's 90% and that profile has been built based on what the ideal candidate looks like, it's pretty hard to argue with whether or not that person is a fit, at least based on the assessment.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I feel like, especially in the hospitality industry in Buffalo, people know the people walking in the door as candidates prior, and this really just eliminates that bias and puts the facts on paper.
Thank you both. I guess just the context for my question is, I find that, you have super energetic leaders that are looking for super energetic individuals, and maybe don't appreciate some of the quieter teammates that they have, or just kind of characteristics like that. I certainly wasn't speaking to like diversity and inclusion, hire like me biases. It was really more kind of those personality traits. Are they energetic? Are they a little quirky like me? You just find that your teams start to look like each other and act like each other, and you think, I don't know that this is the best for what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're absolutely right. You're using this as a guide. As I mentioned earlier, this obviously gives you a really comprehensive performance model to look at. But there are certain things, like you might look at this and let's say for one of the characteristics, like, we'll say outlook. Maybe I show that I have evidence that skeptical people and trusting people are just as successful in this position. I can make that shaded area on that performance model really wide, and that allows me to have that diversity and that flexibility in the position. So thank you so much for participating. Let's keep kind of moving on here. Thinking about our hiring strategies to rebuild. Obviously, you can see that the PXT Select does give you a very deep and full view of a candidate. Because of that, it does take a little bit longer. The assessment time frame is about 40 minutes. And just sort of to improve the assessment process, it uses an adaptive testing process. So let me give you an example for like the math questions. It'll start you at think of degrees of difficulty. There's hard math questions, medium ones, and easy ones. it's going to start you at the medium level. And if you're successful at those questions, it'll make them a little harder and a little harder and a little harder until you reach kind of a point of failure. So very often you'll hear from candidates, boy, the math section was really hard. Because if you start here and they keep asking you harder and harder questions, they'll never ask you the easy questions. And that helps to keep we don't want as the test taker to feel like fatigued from all these easy questions that they can blitz through. So it starts them here and works them up. And if it starts them in the middle and they don't answer those questions correctly, it'll then drop down to an easier and an easier and an easier question. So there's a lot built into it to make it as efficient as an assessment as possible, but it is a little bit lengthier one. Now let's go to fast and simple. There is a version that is called the non-cognitive assessment, and all it's looking at is the behaviors and the interests. So it doesn't ask them any numeric or verbal questions at all. That section is not included. You're just going to get the behaviors and the interests. And then it's a much quicker assessment. And in some cases, you might not even be interested in getting that. So, if you're hiring a registered nurse, I mean, obviously, if I'm a registered nurse, I've already proven that I've got some pretty strong thinking skills. If I could pass my nursing boards, I'm not going to waste your time in terms of getting that information. I just want to know about your behaviors and your interests. So there is a non-cognitive version. The other thing that people love about this particular tool, and if you want to get your virtual assessment center, I can show you how to do this, is there's what's called a self-registration option. So kind of in the olden days, what would happen is you would screen all your candidates, you'd find your top 2, hopefully maybe 3, then you'd send them links to the assessment, wait for them to complete them, and then get them all back and start to compare people. With the PXT Select, you do not pay for an assessment until you actually run a report. So you can have as many people as you want answer the questionnaire. There's no cost associated with that. You won't pay until you actually run a report. So if you're narrowing it down to your top candidates, you can have anybody you want fill out the questionnaire. Then when I know these are the final 2, that data is ready for me to pull and go. So I can move very quickly with this assessment by having my candidates, as many as I'd like, answer the questionnaires up front. And there's a number of tools built in to help you to understand the effectiveness of someone from a leadership perspective. So there's actually a leadership report that looks at how does the individual establish vision, build strategy, drive for results, inspire other people, are they approachable, and are they effective at mentoring others? So that tool is right in there as well. And 2 new tools that we're going to be rolling out this summer. The first, actually you can get access to it today, but they're going through a rebranding. One is specifically for customer service people. So if you're a group that has a number of people in a customer service role, even if you have 1 or 2 people in a customer service role, you might be interested in using this. It works the same as PXT Select, but it really is focused on customer service skills. And it's got this great little feature in it that it will ask you as part of the modeling process, what are your customer service beliefs? Which is actually an interesting experience for an organization to go through. Like, do we even have a set of service beliefs? For example, if a customer wants to chat, I should let them. Now, some people might say, of course, because we believe in very high touch service and you should build relationships with your customers. So if that customer wants to chat, I should let them. Another organization might say, customer service to us is about efficiency. We want to see people quickly. So if a customer wants to chat, I need to navigate that conversation so that I can still drive toward an end result without making the customer feel like I've given them the cold shoulder. So what this will allow you to do is establish, what are your service standards? What are your expectations? Then it asks the candidates, what are your beliefs? And it'll show you where they might conflict. And so that's an interesting little feature there, and it helps you to really drive that customer service culture in a way that works for your organization. The other tool is what we call the Step 1 survey. And the Step 1 survey is really designed for entry-level workers. And it's helping you to make sure you've got honest, hardworking, kind of upstanding people that are really focused on doing the best they can when they get to work. So it assesses things like their personal integrity, substance abuse, reliability, work ethic, their past employment history, Have they had employment-related problems? Any kind of theft issues or abuse when it comes to computer or internet, email? Then you might be sitting there saying, does anyone say like, geez, I only do cocaine on the weekends, at least since I got out of prison for stealing from my last job? Yes, people do. And this has really been a tool that has allowed organizations to reduce the costs associated with some of these things, but also to ensure that they're bringing in people that have that strong work ethic. So that step one survey is a great tool. So, really what's nice about this platform that you have access to now is you can take the most comprehensive assessment if that's what you're looking for. You could do something quick and dirty and fast. You can target specifically for leaders, service, entry-level workers, and it's all sitting in one place. So as you're heading into your rebuild phase, the tools are there for you to get the data you need to make good decisions and to move your organization forward. So let's just chat for our few final minutes here around resilience. And what do I mean by resilience? Employers have really taken on a new role in the past 3 months of being the new social safety net for their employees, and that we are looking out for their financial well-being, their physical well-being, their mental well-being, a role that maybe some organizations have played in the past, but most have not really thought about. And when it came to assessments, we have been doing a pretty good job. And I know many of you on the call already use different tools to plan and to assess and to select the best candidates. But sometimes it trails off when it comes to onboarding and managing and developing and now really nurturing people. And the nice thing about PXT Select and the tools that you will have in your virtual assessment center is that from that one assessment, there are a dozen reports that can really support you after you bring the person on board. So one that is sometimes overlooked is an individual report. So we are fortunate to have clients who ask us to debrief their new hires. So we set up a process. Typically, Stephanie's the debriefer. She'll contact your new hire, 3 or 4 weeks into their employment and go through the results with them. And especially if we understand your culture and the team, then we can really do a great job of helping them understand how they fit. But so often what I hear from people is, yeah, I took an assessment when they hired me, but I never got the results. And what a shame, what a lost opportunity. And sometimes it's because I know you're busy, and if the report's complicated, I need to spend a lot of time debriefing someone. PXT Select makes it super easy by giving you a report that's specific for the individual. And what the individual report does is it allows someone to really see this verbal explanation of their traits. So it makes for a great onboarding tool. It's a really quick and dirty. You could even make it a self-study, although I think as someone mentioned earlier, it's kind of nice to add that color commentary so that people can really get the results and start to think about how they can be most effective in their new role. And there's also a team report. So here's Oliver Chase, and it shows how he compares to the rest of the team with whom he's going to be working. And as our group came up with, he might be a little, forceful in his decision making and in some of his actions. He's a pretty assertive guy, and he can see that some of his coworkers might be more unassuming, and now think about what does assertiveness look like and points that he should consider. So like you, some of your teammates tend to be direct when giving feedback and communicating, but avoid dominating team discussions. Instead, try this. So this team report, unlike other team reports that just say, here's the team's profile, this one says, here's the team's profile and how it impacts you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and things that you should be careful about. There's also a great tool for managers to see the score of the person that they're hiring and what they need to know about the person, some management tips about the person, and things that they might want to consider when managing this person going forward. So they can learn about the candidate or the person they've hired, and then they can do the comparison that shows, here's you, here's Oliver, here's your tendencies, here's Oliver's tendencies, here's some things you should consider doing. So this is all right within the system. Once the person starts, you can pull that individual report, you can pull the team report, you can pull the manager's coaching report and get it out to folks so that they know what they need to do to help this individual really thrive in our environment and even balance some of the personal things that they might be juggling with emotionally, given all the changes that we're going through now as a world. So last thing I want to show you is our friend Oliver Chase. We hired him to be a sales guy. Now I want to know, will he maybe thrive in a sales management role? So there's a report that I affectionately refer to as the succession planning report. The system calls it a multiple candidates report because it actually allows you to put multiple candidates on one report. It's called multiple candidates, but they certainly could be employees. You might want to take some existing members of your organization and put a candidate against them and see how they stack. Why I call this a succession planning report is once I have those performance models in the system, I can say, show me the fit score for anybody that works here. So I can see who might be a great match for some of these positions that we should be considering through the hiring process. So Alicia said before, they have used these assessments for everybody forever. They have tons of data. So it's super easy. If I'm looking for a manager of our claims department and I've got that performance model built, I can run this report and say, who in our organization is a great match for it? Because it's super logical to think, well, maybe I should take my best claims person and make them the manager of the claims department, when really there's a super great person sitting in another area that we might not consider, that this will help to kind of bubble up that information to be right at my fingertips. So it shows, here's my candidates for the sales manager position or people that might be great for the position. And Oliver's right there with a 70% fit score. And I can look at the 5 people I'm considering for that position and very quickly see, who's in that performance model, where does Oliver fit? And yeah, this seems that not only might he be effective in a sales role, but he could be the future leader of this sales group. And how do we start grooming him for that as we go forward? And then of course I can do that leadership report, give him the insight he needs to build some of his leadership skills. So there's a lot of tools right within the system that you can use to help people to think about their changing roles, helping people to onboard successfully. If I'm coaching either a new hire or someone that has maybe been struggling through this process, they could do the PXT Select so their manager understands their style and how they can get some coaching tips so they can help that person to be successful. And then of course for your longer term planning, for succession planning and those types of things, very turnkey tool right within the system.